Begin in one moment, maybe a minute or so. We'll wait for our camera people. We'll bring our meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our meeting. I want to welcome the Minister to our committee meeting today as we begin our study on the loss of Canadian citizenship for the years 1947, 1977, and 2007. I want to welcome the Minister's Deputy, Mr. Richard Fadden, to our meeting as well. The meeting will run for approximately 2 hours, from 11 until 1. It's a very important topic, and we're happy that the Minister is here. She might be able to shed some light on the problem of the loss of Canadian citizenship and to offer some solutions as well. So I'll hand it over to you, Minister, for your opening comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, honourable members, Monsieur le Président, Mesdames et Messieurs les députés.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, the members, I want to thank you for this invitation. It's an opportunity for me to appear before you as a new Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Can we get a copy of the Minister's speech in both official languages? She's reading from notes.
It is not. Not available at this time.
Not yet available. They will be available later.
It is customary, Mr. Chair, that when the Minister appears before a committee, that notes or a speech be given to the members. So I'm sure that the Minister can probably send one of her staff to photocopy it and bring it in to us for us to follow.
The notes will be made available, I understand, from the Minister in due course this morning. So we'll just we'll wait for that to happen. I'll ask the Minister to continue on.
Thank you. Comme je disais.
As I was saying, it's an opportunity to make my first appearance before you as the new Minister of Citizenship and Immigration.
Before you on the important subject of citizenship. In my new capacity as Minister for Citizenship and Immigration, I am grateful for the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts and recent actions on a matter that is so fundamental to Canadian identity. Just last week, I had the honour of attending a very special citizenship ceremony at the Supreme Court, where we celebrated the 60th anniversary of Canadian citizenship. And we held a special event where families from every province and territory gathered to take the oath of citizenship. And while the ceremony was very moving, the event gave me the chance to reflect on how fortunate we are to be Canadian citizens and what it means to be a citizen of Canada. That is, that citizenship isn't just about rights, it's also about responsibilities. Now, with respect to my appearance before you today, I must say that I welcome this opportunity to discuss the issues surrounding the acquisition, the retention, and the resumption of Canadian citizenship. Recently, the introduction of the U.S. Western Hemisphere Travel Initiative has increased attention on the issue of citizenship, and as people are seeking to get passports, questions about citizenship and proof of citizenship are emerging. Some media reports have highlighted cases of various individuals who have been affected by the loss of Canadian citizenship. And while some people have, for various reasons, lost their Canadian citizenship, there are also examples of people who never actually had citizenship, despite having every reason to believe that they were Canadian citizens. Other cases have involved individuals who have not lost their citizenship, but rather, and this is an important difference, have lost the proof of citizenship and need to apply to replace it. To reiterate what I said in a statement released on January 24th, I wish to reassure concerned stakeholders that in almost all cases, anyone who is born in Canada is a Canadian citizen. Recent media reports have highlighted very few examples of individuals who, having lived in Canada most of their lives, actually do not have citizenship. And I will emphasize that my officials have identified a small number of people who fall under these anomaly categories. As I said before, these cases deserve immediate attention, and that's why I have and continue to make these individual cases a priority. But before I go on, Mr. Chair, I know that many members of this committee and other stakeholders want the citizenship anomaly issues addressed through amendments to the Citizenship Act. In this regard, I am open to considering appropriate amendments to the Citizenship Act, and I'd welcome the committee's participation in further examining the nature and scope of the problem to help us identify and evaluate a number of options. If there are responses to this issue that would protect the value and integrity of Canadian citizenship, then these should be considered. If all members of the committee support specific legislative changes, I'd be happy to look at those options. And in the present situation, the advantage of having unanimity is obvious. We all want a lasting solution, and I believe that we can find one acceptable to all of us. That said, my immediate focus is on helping people who are caught up in this situation right now. Legislative change could take time, and affected individuals should not have to wait indefinitely for the Citizenship Act to be amended and passed. I look forward to the committee's recommendations and to hearing from the various witnesses who will be presenting over the next few weeks. It's my hope that these hearings will provide viable options for consideration in looking at the most effective ways to address the issues. And I want to assure all concerned that I will carefully examine and consider the options, legislative or otherwise, in the interest of creating a fairer system for all. And I appreciate the dedication and creativity that each member around this table has shown to resolve these issues. And I know that several of you have worked hard for countless hours on previous committee studies and reports relating to citizenship. And I look forward to you sharing with me your combined 19 years of committee experience. At this time, I'd like to provide some context to the current situation. While the problem is real and deserves immediate attention, there is no evidence that it's as massive as has been reported in the media or portrayed by some honourable members. These reports have mentioned thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even possibly over 1 million people being affected. Well, Mr. Chair, to put things in perspective, at this time, we're talking about approximately 450 individuals whose cases have come to our attention and merit further consideration. And despite all the attention on this issue, that number has not grown significantly. In fact, many of the calls that we've received have been about Canadians who have simply lost their documents. These Canadians have not lost their citizenship, they've lost the proof of their citizenship and have needed to replace it, much the same way as anyone who loses a birth certificate has to apply to replace it. Now, we recognize that this may be a frustrating step for someone who needs that proof to apply for a passport, for example, but in this age of heightened security concerns, it's important that we take steps to verify identity and check for potential fraudulent applications. Le ministère de la Citoyenneté est...
Every year, the Department of Citizenship and Immigration processes over 60,000 applications for citizenship by individuals who need citizenship in order to apply for a passport or some other type of benefit. Most of these individuals receive these citizenship several months later without a problem.
Our focus is on the 450 cases. This includes people who, by law, had to take steps to retain their citizenship but did not do so. It includes people who never became citizens and people who could have registered to be citizens but who did not. Now, as members of the committee are well aware, a person's status may be affected by the 1947 Act, by the 1977 Act, or amendments to them depending on their situation. As members of this committee are well aware, not every application for Canadian citizenship is legitimate. But each application involves a human story and deserves close attention. For the interest of all concerned, I'd like to outline for you some of the actions that I've recently taken to address the issues discussed since becoming minister last month. My departmental officials are giving these applications serious attention, Mr. Chair. They are ensuring that the due diligence expected by you and the Canadians that we represent is carried out. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm using the powers available to me as Minister under the Citizenship Act and moving to resolve cases just as quickly as possible. I've recently obtained approval through the Governor and Council for a special grant of citizenship for 33 individuals. Now, this group of individuals includes those who do not meet the provisions within the current legislation for a regular citizenship grant, but whose circumstances call for special considerations. These people demonstrate a significant attachment to Canada, currently live within the country, and have lived in Canada most of their lives. In many cases, we're dealing with individuals who never became citizens. For example, we have cases of people who were born abroad and didn't have their birth registered. Between 1947 and 1977, if you were born outside Canada to a Canadian parent, you had to register your birth abroad. Some people who lived on the Canada-US border were born in the US because that's where the closest hospital was. Under the laws in place at the time, if the birth was not registered, they would have US citizenship and not Canadian citizenship. These individuals could have registered as Canadian citizens, but did not. In other cases, we're dealing with individuals who were Canadian, had to take steps by a certain date to remain Canadian, but didn't do so. The current law says that if you were born abroad to a Canadian citizen, you're a Canadian citizen. But if your Canadian parent was also born outside Canada to a Canadian parent, you have to take steps to retain your citizenship by the time you reach 28 years of age. This government didn't put the rules in place. They date back to 1977. And as long as we have had citizenship, Mr. Chair, we have generally required individuals born abroad to Canadian parents to retain their citizenship. Some members have criticized this requirement, suggesting that a Canadian is a Canadian is a Canadian. But that would mean, by extension, that an individual could move away from Canada and his or her descendants, for generations to come, would continue to be Canadian citizens without ever setting foot here or developing any real attachment to Canada. And I'd like to note that in 2005, this committee recognized that there should indeed be limits on this type of citizenship, and that the department should revise its citizenship cards to make this clearer. Well, I'm pleased to say that we've now done that. And with respect to cases, I've made it my department's priority to review each of them on an individual basis. With respect to actions that we're taking, I've asked my department to take a number of steps to deal with the situation, and I'd like to list 5 of them for you. We've assigned additional staff to handle these cases and created a dedicated unit in our call center so that people with questions about their citizenship can speak directly with someone who can help them. In most cases, where there's a question of loss of citizenship, a program officer is being assigned to each case. We are working with our partners to ensure that while cases are under review, nobody is removed from the country and benefits such as health care and old age security are continued. We're working with the Passport Office to refer people to our call center to speak directly with our citizenship agents. And we're helping to expedite the process for people who have not lost their citizenship, but rather who have lost their proof of citizenship and need to apply to replace it. Mr. Chair, allow me to give members of the committee a sense of the response that we've been getting to these answers, to these measures. We get status updates every working day, so the numbers will continue to change. But since we set up the dedicated line for citizenship issues in our call center on January 26th of this year, we have received 692 inquiries about a potential loss of citizenship. To put that in perspective, 692 calls represent about 0.5% of the overall calls to our call center on all issues. In 675 of those cases, their citizenship has been confirmed and no further action is required. Of the remaining 17, that's 17, Mr. Chair, 7 have been invited to apply for a discretionary grant of citizenship. Another 3 were identified as permanent residents and asked to apply for a regular grant. 2 more have been asked to apply for permanent residence, and 5 require further examination. Now, that's a far cry from the hundreds of thousands, indeed the millions, of cases that we're hearing about in the media. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, each case must be reviewed on an individual basis. When a case has merit, it is essential that it be resolved as soon as possible. As I said earlier, we have obtained approval to grant citizenship to 33 individuals, and we will work to resolve more cases.
now I'd be remiss if I did not briefly mention the situation of Mr. Joseph Taylor, although I am limited by what I can say about Mr. Taylor because his case is currently before the courts. And although the Government of Canada is appealing the federal court decision on Mr. Taylor, I want to assure members that I'm not unsympathetic to his plight. We are prepared to expedite an application for permanent resident status, which will allow him to apply for citizenship once he has satisfied certain requirements that would include living in the country for a period of time. Now, I wish to emphasize that the reason that we're appealing the federal court ruling is because we believe that it is wrong in law. It reinterprets citizenship and extends it prior to Canada having its own Citizenship Act in 1947. It applies the Charter retroactively, meaning that it applies the Charter to a point in time before the Charter even existed. These and other factors have implications for all legal matters that go well beyond Mr. Taylor. I'll just give you one example, if I may. The federal court ruling suggested that not enough effort was made to notify Mr. Taylor and his family directly of the relevant provisions of the 1947 Act that could impact his status. Mr. Taylor, who had lived here for 3 months when he was 1 year old, had moved back to Britain with his mother. The Canadian government had no way of knowing where he was. The judge's ruling suggested that the normal legislative and parliamentary process is insufficient and that all individuals who may be affected by a change in legislation must be notified no matter what the circumstances. Now, imagine the impact that this could have. Legislators regularly change tax laws, for example. And if individuals could claim that because they weren't notified individually and directly, the new law wouldn't apply to them, well, if that were the case, we'd have no way to apply the law to anyone. Mr. Chair, I repeat what I said at the beginning. We're fortunate to be Canadian citizens, and Canadians expect us to take the issue of citizenship very seriously. We need to apply the law and to ensure that our system is functioning as it should and as it was designed to work. Of course, there must be room for compassion and common sense, and where it is merited, we have some flexibility to help individuals, and I will continue to exercise that flexibility. And before I conclude, I'd like to briefly address an issue that was in the media yesterday. We are committed to establishing an office that will help qualified foreign-trained professionals become accredited so that they can practice in their chosen fields right here in Canada. The 2006 federal budget set aside $18 million over 2 years to take the first steps towards establishing this entity, and Advantage Canada reaffirmed that the government will move forward on this commitment. Improved labour market integration is critical so that Canada can continue attracting and retaining the skilled immigrants that it needs. Now, I want to stress that all levels of government have a role to play in integrating newcomers into Canadian society and into our economy. My colleague, Monty Solberg, Minister of Human Resources and Social Development Canada, and I are engaging our partners as we move forward, including provinces, territories, the 440 separate regulatory agencies that are each provincially or territorially licensed, post-secondary institutions, sector councils, and employers right across the country. And we look forward to making future announcements about our progress in the coming weeks. Now, to sum up, the issue of citizenship is fundamental to Canadian identity. With citizenship comes both rights and responsibilities. Moving forward, I want to assure honourable members and concerned stakeholders that as Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, I look forward to this committee's recommendations. I look forward to a collaborative and constructive effort on behalf of all members to address these issues in the most appropriate manner. And I want to assure all honourable members that I will carefully examine the options, legislative or otherwise, in the interest of creating a better and fairer system for all. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister, for your very informative and very interesting statement. We will now go to committee members, and we have a 7-minute round of questioning to begin with. And I will go to Mr. Tilligdy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Minister. Last Friday, we all saw the celebration at the Supreme Court of an event that occurred January 3rd, 1947. I might mention, as we celebrate the 60th year of citizenship, a more appropriate way of celebrating it would have been to bring it in compliance with the Charter, which is 25 years old this year. Clearly, the 1947 Citizenship Act was very, very discriminatory. We had the Supreme Court rule on it under the Brenner case. But getting back to the citizenship ceremony, it might have been enhanced had you invited Paul Martin, former Prime Minister, to the ceremonies, given the fact that it was his father that was the original architect for citizenship, and further, it would have been useful if members of the committee might have been invited to the ceremony, because we obviously have a great interest. But getting to your numbers, you mentioned you threw down a marker and you said 450 people. And I dare say, Minister, we're going to hold you to that number, because when these hearings are finished, you will see that there are tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands. And just to start off on that, here we have Mr. John Reynolds, who worked on S2, said, I remember one of the bureaucrats telling us in committee there could be as many as 200,000 of these people. Well, big deal. We bring in supposedly 300,000 a year in immigration, refugees, others. If you're a Canadian, shouldn't you like to straighten that out even quicker for somebody who was born here, has a birthright here? Well, Minister, many people have been denied that right. I direct you to the decision of the Supreme Court that pertained to Brenner. And they ruled in 1997. Now, this is the Supreme Court, Minister. This is the highest court in the land, and they ruled that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual discrimination, meaning whether you derive your citizenship from your father or from your mother. And that's the Supreme Court. And that actually was applied by the department till 2004, till Patricia Burkett, Registrar of Canadian Citizenship at that time, called it a provisional decision, and it was cancelled as of 2004. Minister, one thing that you could answer for us, how many cases we have before the courts right now pertaining to citizenship? How can you be appealing the Clark case on the one hand, one of the Clark brothers and sister, that's a family of 4. 3 of them got citizenship restored to them under Section 5.4 of the Act that you keep referring to. And the 4th one is going to court. And we would like to know as to how that is going. We want to know the number of cases handled by citizenship that are before the courts, and we also want to know what the cost is. Now, Madam Minister, you made some commentary about the Joe Taylor case. I'm going to pass you some information on. Here's a picture of Mr. Taylor when he was a baby, a son of a Canadian veteran who fought for this country in the Second World War. And I will also pass on to you a pamphlet that these people got when they landed on ship. And it says, as soon as the ship docks, Canadian immigration officials will come aboard. These men will complete the formalities for your entry into Canada, which automatically makes you a Canadian citizen. Now, Madam Minister, I think you would benefit from having that information. Another specific question I have for you is under 5.4. You said you gave out 33. Well, don't you think that instead of having a minister giving citizenship to those she feels like she likes. Isn't that political, and should not this be in law? From the Mennonite Central Committee, we have a figure of 30,000 people, and I have a memo, and Mr. Jensen will be in front of us, 30,000 people pertaining to lost retention. And then we have a whole bunch for people being married abroad, where we had religious ceremonies and not civil ceremonies. And I asked you the question in the House, how can we discriminate against people being married in a church? And I'll leave the question and get that, Mr. Chair.
I think you're climbing into 5 minutes now, and this is a 7-minute round, so the minister has 2 minutes to answer, so I thought I'd remind you of that. Okay. Is that the question?
That's what I said.
Okay.
Finished.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Talegdi. So we'll go to the minister or her official to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the 2 minutes remaining, I'll try to address as many of those issues as I can in the time that permits. Unfortunately, I do not have the number of cases at hand at the moment, but I am told that we can get them before this hearing is over. I'd like to address the issue of the numbers again. When I said 450, those are the number of cases that we have identified, people who have contacted us and with whom we have identified that there is an issue arising out of the application of the various acts, and also sometimes its interpretation of those, people who failed to renew or retain their citizenship when they need to. In 1947, it was a very different world than what it is now. We have common law marriage was not considered an acceptable thing at all. There were illegitimate children. Unfortunately, had a stigma attached to them at that time that no longer exists. Times have changed. But under and I'm sure as the honourable member is well aware, that the laws of the time were applied at the time. And the way the laws are written, anyone who is affected by them is affected by the laws that were in place at that time. So if someone were born in 1946, that predates the Citizenship Act. So this laws under the Citizenship Act classically do not apply. That's what's being debated in the courts right now, whether the laws are in fact retroactive. But up until this point in time, if someone were born in 1948, where Canadian citizenship did exist, the rules are different than they were in 1946. And those laws changed again in 1977. And this is where a lot of the confusion arises, because the rules changed once again. So somebody born in 1978 was working under different rules than someone in 1976. So we're dealing with a variety of circumstances. And that's why I think it's really important that we look at each case individually on its own merits and look at it within the eyes of the law, not politically, but how do we do the right thing for these people? What is right by Canadian standards, the standards that we hold dear today, and still fully within the legal system with respect for these individuals. There has been a lot of speculation about the numbers, no question, but we've only identified the 450 individual cases to date. That's why we set up this special hotline, so that we can hear if there are more, because we want to address them as quickly as we can.
We'll go to Madam Fay.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Minister for coming here today before the committee. Obviously, I would have liked to have had your speech in advance, because we are obviously listening to the simultaneous translation, and I'm not sure that we got everything that you had said. What I'm concerned with is that you made an announcement earlier, and you talked about an expiry date with regard to citizenship cards in order to resolve a problem with children, young Canadians who lost their citizenship before the age of, or at the age of 28. I want to refer to an article that appeared in La Presse newspaper early this year, which talked about this issue. And what I'm concerned with is that in this article, the immigration spokesperson for Citizenship and Immigration said that you could not estimate the number of people who could have lost their citizenship because they would have had to fill out a form before the age of 28 on their birthday. So what was the date of expiry on the card? Will this improve things if before they didn't fill out a form to get the card? So, and I'd also like to know what measures were taken by your department, because obviously these people are facing with a problem that existed since February 15, 2005. So I'd like to know what measures your department has taken in order to communicate and inform these individuals, perhaps through the embassies or the consulates. I don't know what you did to reach these Canadians if they live abroad.
Well, one of the challenges, obviously, is that for people who have perhaps very limited or even no real attachment to Canada, we don't know who they are, we don't know where they are. People who come into this country, we track them as they come in, but we don't track them as they leave. So if someone were abroad and reached this situation at the age of 28, even to find them, to advise them that they're in that circumstance is virtually impossible. We can make the information available at our embassies, but whether people check with them, we don't know.
M'avez-vous mis de l'information sur votre site web?
But did you put the information on your website about this to ensure that they could get this information?
Yes, we have done that. And our offices abroad know that. Perhaps the deputy could tell you a few more of the steps we've taken.
Mr. Chairman, we have systematically made the information available to all of our missions abroad. And we have a practice there of having both pamphlets and posters in various Canadian embassies. And if, as people contact Canadian embassies abroad, citizenship matters arise, people are reminded of this sort of thing. We do the same thing at CIC offices in Canada. There are some in every province. We've also regularly put information on our website. And at the time the changes were occurring, we also, I believe, made purchased a number of advertisements in the media. But as the Minister said, our real problem is a lot of people simply disappear from the Department's perspective and they're impossible to find.
Okay. Pouvez-vous peut-être fournir
Could you perhaps provide the committee the details of those advertising campaigns and information campaigns and confirm that each office abroad has on their website this information, and at what time was this information made available? With the implementation of the need to have a passport on January 23rd of this year, have efforts been made in order to make people aware of the fact that they might not be Canadian or that they'll have to take additional steps because our offices, because we share a border with the U.S., we get a number of these cases come before our offices, and I know you mentioned some cases earlier of people who got on the fast track, if you will. Some citizens in Quebec got this fast track, so you are aware of these cases. We're following these cases closely, and we really appreciate what you've done in these instances. But what tangible measures are you taking on a permanent basis? What is the department doing?
If you like.
This is a bit of a matter of detail, so I'll answer if I may. The Passport Office, I think, was the lead in dealing with anticipated increases in demand because of the United States regulations, and we had shared some information with them. Since this became a significant issue, we've put into place arrangements with the Passport Office, which will remain in effect, whereby any case that they encounter in which citizenship is an issue, they will refer it to Citizenship and Immigration Canada. We also have a permanent and ongoing connection with them whereby if somebody is asking for a passport and there's some urgency involved, we have a system whereby the various documents can be faxed to our Citizenship Processing Centre in Cape Breton, and usually there's a 48-hour turnaround.
Okay.
I think in practical terms what we've done is we've made sure that the Passport Office is fully aware of the citizenship issues. We have a dedicated call center line, and they have standing arrangements to communicate with our processing center in Cape Breton.
Mais pourquoi qu'on a des citoyens qui ont
But why have some citizens tried to renew their passports and then they've been told that in fact they're not Canadian citizens? Why has this kind of case appeared?
Basically because
Il y a des
there
erreurs
are,
au niveau des passeports.
well, anyone who applies for a Canadian passport is required to provide proof of citizenship, and this can be done in a number of ways. And if they don't have proofs of Canadian citizenship, the matter then becomes an issue. It's become a particularly important issue because of the American decision to require passports. But
les personnes avaient en main des passeports.
But individuals had their passports.
I'm not aware of. I'm not aware of anyone who had a passport and was trying to renew it and then was denied. Where we're finding it was people who are getting passports for the first time. There may be cases, I'm not aware of them, but where we're generally finding it is people who've never had a passport who are then trying to furnish proof of citizenship, for example, a birth certificate, and they don't have it. And that's when we go looking, and that's when we're discovering that they never had the citizenship or they lost it because they failed to retain it.
OK. Est-ce qu'il me reste un peu de temps?
Very
Have any time left, Mr. Chair?
around 7 minutes, but I'll allow a short question if you need to complete.
Merci.
Thank you very much. Well, in fact, the newspapers this morning talked about the possibility that some members here in the House of Commons are not Canadian citizens. Is this information that you can confirm? Are you able to confirm this? It's somewhat troubling to learn that this morning in the newspapers. There are rumors that a Conservative member, in fact, is not a Canadian citizen. So I'm trying to determine whether this information is true. Is it true? Are you aware of this?
Obviously, we can't talk about individual cases, but what I can say to ease the mind of some of the members of the House is that anyone who is born in Canada, unless they were born to a diplomat, is a Canadian citizen. So anyone who was born here is a Canadian citizen.
Thank you, Madam Fye. Madam Minister, I will call upon Mr. Sixay to begin his 7-minute round.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here this morning, and congratulations on your appointment. I hope you enjoy the portfolio as much as some of the people who sit around this table and who understand the importance of citizenship and immigration policy to Canada. You certainly seem to appreciate that, given your opening statement about the meaning of Canadian citizenship, and I think that's why the folks who run into these problems are really disturbed and anxious when they're told that somehow they have to prove that they're a Canadian citizen when they've assumed that all their lives that was the case, and to be told that you haven't lost your citizenship, you've just lost proof. Well, it's kind of it's a bit hard to hear sometimes, because I think to most people that sounds like exactly the same thing. And I can understand why people are very upset when they're confronted with that moment. Minister, I'm also concerned. I appreciate that you're saying that you're open to reviewing the Citizenship Act and hearing new legislation, and we've heard that a number of times around this table. We heard it certainly from the last government, from the two ministers in the 38th Parliament, who both encouraged us to work on citizenship issues and then never produced legislation. I am concerned that your government has taken the money that was set aside for developing a Citizenship Act out of the budget, and that money's been removed. And maybe you can comment on why that was done and why that development money is no longer there. It seems to me that if we are serious about fixing some of the issues with regard to the Citizenship Act, that money is very, very important to the process. But, Minister, what I wanted to ask about specifically with regard to some of the lost Canadians is the situation of children born to armed forces personnel who were serving overseas in the period 1947 to 1977. This is one group that have been in touch with me who are very concerned about the circumstances that they find themselves in. They're being told that they have to have the document registration of birth abroad, when many of them have a DND, a Department of National Defense issued certificate of birth. And they're finding that birth certificate is not acceptable when they go to apply for passport applications. It's not acceptable proof of citizenship. And I'm wondering if you can tell me what the exact problem has been with the DND issued certificate of birth for these children who were born to Canadian Armed Forces personnel serving overseas in the Cold War period.
Well, there have been a number of different issues there. One thing I can assure you is that CIC and the Department of National Defense are working together on this issue because, again, we want to do the right thing for these people. As you're probably aware, there was an extension of the period in which the parents could apply to register the children. And quite frankly, in the last 6 months, about 20 of these children have been contacted us, and that we are working with D&D to resolve their issues. You made reference to people not understanding the difference between being citizens and being proof and having the proof. It does sound confusing, and I do sympathize with them in their frustration, but I might compare it to having a job and having your corporate ID card. Even if you misplace your pass, you're still an employee there. You just need the card to prove it for various people. These individuals are still Canadian citizens. They just don't have the piece of paper that proves it.
But, Minister, you didn't answer my question about what was unacceptable about the DND certificate of birth. Why has that been shown not to be an acceptable proof of Canadian citizenship? Since most people seem to have that one, the registration of birth abroad is a document that they get issued subsequent to that. Why isn't this DND certificate of birth acceptable as proof of citizenship?
I can understand the frustration, but as I understand it, D&D births had to be registered both with the department, and you're talking about certificates of birth abroad, but they had to be registered with the Registrar of Citizenship. And the rules at the time required that a particular form be used in a particular manner. D&D had the habit systematically of registering those births both for their own purposes, for D&D purposes, and systematically registering with the Registrar of Canadian Citizenship. Insofar as we can make out, there are relatively few cases where D&D didn't do both, but it was a requirement of the rules at the time. It could not just be the D&D form. There was a specific form required by what was then the Department of the Secretary of State to register the births abroad. And it's one of those situations, as the Minister said, the rules at the time required that particular form to be filled in a particular way. And again, as the Minister said, we've only found about 20 cases so far where there are difficulties, and I have no doubt we'll work through them.
So, it's a bureaucrat essentially who didn't fill out the necessary forms. Is that the issue for these folks who are being told that that their document that they have is not acceptable proof of Canadian citizenship?
There is a possibility of bureaucratic error, but I would also suggest that it's the responsibility of a parent to make sure that things are done properly as well.
And you say it's only 20 children. Okay. Do you know how many people would fit into that category? Do you have any sense of how many children were born to Canadian Armed Forces personnel in that period?
It would be thousands, but I don't know.
Okay. Okay. I wanted to ask another question, Minister, about another citizenship issue that we dealt with here at this committee, the Bill C-14 on the extending citizenship immediately to children adopted by Canadians abroad. The committee has done its work on that and sent it back to the House, but it hasn't come back to the House for further debate. And I'm wondering if there's some problem with that legislation or what the delay in actually moving on something that I think everybody around this table thinks is very, very important legislation.
Well, it is important legislation. That's why we introduced it. And if it's passed, it will make things fairer by treating children who are born. Who are adopted and treating them fairly compared to children who are born here. We are reviewing the bill as it was amended. I do not set the agenda and the timetable for the House. The House leader does that. So in terms of timing, I'm afraid we'd both have to take that up with him.
Okay, well, it's curious that it was something that has been a priority for a long time. The committee made recommendations in the last Parliament about it. There was an attempt by the previous government to introduce the same legislation. And unfortunately, it didn't move either. So I'm just really anxious for that legislation because I know how important it is to so many parents, and it would make so many people's lives easier if that was extended. So anything that you can do to move that back on the agenda, I think, would be appreciated by many Canadians. And if there is some problem with the legislation, I think everyone around this table would be enthusiastic to try and resolve those problems. And I think we've made that offer individually on a number of occasions to see that done if there is some problem.
Thank you, Mr. 6A. Mr. Kamarnicki.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for your remarks and comments. I'll have some specific questions in the second round, but I'd like to just have a overview in a general sort of way, and perhaps commenting somewhat on the remarks made by Mr. Telegli. There's no question that the former Prime Minister Paul Martin's father may have introduced the Act, but the problems we're experiencing today relate to the 1947-77 Act, and there have been since six different Liberal ministers, and the problem didn't arise overnight. It certainly has been there for a long time, and no action has been taken to remedy those problems. And I was heartened to hear that you were open to looking at this problem in two ways. In a short-term basis, you've taken steps, as you've outlined, on a very immediate basis to address some of the anomalies that were created by that legislation and have existed for a long time, but perhaps have come to light just now, and that you're looking at some ways and means to address the problem on a more permanent basis. As we look forward, as we look back, I guess, to what we've done so far in the year, before we go forward, certainly this government has indicated a commitment to newcomers, and our budget has reduced by 50%. The right of permanent residence fee, which was $975, now reduced to $490, which is a significant factor for newcomers that need to establish and need the funds on a more immediate basis. And of course, an issue that you've been quite instrumentally involved is the foreign credentials recognition and the fact.
We're here to talk about citizenship, and maybe the parliamentary secretary will tell us what that has to do with citizenship. I know we moved from playing hardball to softball by having the parliamentary secretary ask questions, or perhaps t-ball, but it still has to be relevant to the question at hand.
Well, I think it's rather broad-ranging what members can talk about before an immigration committee, especially when the minister is here to address all topics pertaining to this particular issue. So I'll just ask Mr. Kamarnicki to probably keep his remarks a little bit confined
to the topic. As I mentioned, I would get more specific, but I just want to remind this member that this particular government has taken steps to address issues that have concerned newcomers, and indeed, after about 9 or 10 years of funding freezes, have committed $307 million to help integrate newcomers and citizens into our country, including opening up temporary foreign worker units in both Calgary and Vancouver. So there's a significant interest in this issue. Now, specifically, because of the Western Travel Initiative, there have been some anomalies that have been brought to the attention of this government that have been there for a long time and need some remedy. And my question, I guess, to the minister would be, in addition to some of the issues that I've raised that we've already dealt with in the 1 year, what do you perceive in terms of your direction for the next year in various issues, including specifically many of the anomalies that have been brought to your attention, and how might the committee be helpful in addressing these particular issues?
Well, thank you very much for the question. There are a lot of things, as I mentioned a few in my speech, approaches that we are taking to try to address the situation. I mean, obviously, there's a short, there's a medium, and there are long-term considerations here. As you well pointed out, these situations didn't spring up overnight, though they date back to a law that was enacted in 1977, one in 1947. The timing was such that many of the cases, the people, for example, who could lose their citizenship if they didn't apply to retain it, those Canadians second generation born out of the country. In other words, both they and their parents were born out of the country. For those people, they were just coming of age in 2005, so we're starting to hear about it. And now particularly with the U.S. Western Hemisphere initiative, where the passport is required, people are applying for more of them. We're getting 21,000 applications a day for passports. So people are starting to suddenly find, oops, I always thought I had Canadian citizenship, but I don't. Or they're finding that they need proof of it, and they don't have it. And that's the vast majority of the cases with which we're dealing, is people who have lost the piece of paper or who had never had the piece of paper that shows that they are Canadian citizens. So that's why we've set up the hotline. That's why we've got the dedicated task force members to deal with those specific cases, because we want to make sure that their needs, those people's needs, are met right now. We want to relieve the uncertainty that goes with it. That's in the short term, because we believe that these people shouldn't have to wait for legislative change, even regulatory change. As you're well aware, that can take a considerable length of time. They need action now. That's what we're trying to provide. That being said, there is a long-term issue here with 4 different, roughly, circumstances under which people could be operating. We need to make sure that it's that there's some consistency, that there's some transparency, and that's why I'm appealing to the committee for your input. And how do we fix this for the longer term, so that we don't have situations like this coming in the future, while we still protect the currency of a Canadian citizenship. Because especially post 9/11, we simply can't afford to just let everyone in. We have to maintain the integrity of the system. We have to continue with the security checks, and because that's the number one thing, is to protect the safety and security of those people who are already living in this country. So we need to do a balance there. How do we grant citizenship to those people who deserve it? How do we protect those of us who are already here?
Just to follow up to that, Mr. Minister, there's no question that there are various Madam Minister, there are various issues related to unique situations that have developed because of the anomalies of the Act, and one of those were second-generation Canadians. It's in other words, Canadians born outside of Canada to Canadians that were born outside of Canada. And it was the Immigration Committee that indicated there needed to be some connection, or some substantial connection to the country at some point, to recognize citizenship and to preserve it. But there are others that do have substantial connection, as you mentioned, those particularly that live on the border. And can they be assured that all the old age security, the supplements, and all health benefits will continue while you approach matters on an interim and a more permanent basis?
The Minister, please.
To that question. Number one is for the individuals that have been identified as having these anomalies of citizenship. Yes, we've taken steps to ensure that, number one, while their case is being reviewed, they will not be removed from the country. Secondly, their benefits will continue if they're currently receiving them, because we do not want any hardship imposed upon them. That's for the short term for these specific individuals. Over the long term and the broader picture, most if not all of our social benefits are not based on citizenship, but rather on residence. So old age security, for example, it's not based on whether you're a citizenship or not. It's how long you've lived within the country that determines your eligibility. So Canadians are not at risk from that point of view, but we are making sure that for these people who are directly affected by the things we're trying to fix today, that their benefits will continue and that they will not be removed from the country while their case is being reviewed.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Kamarnicki. That completes our 7-minute rounds. We'll now go to 5-minute rounds, and I'll begin with Mr. Algebra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Madam Minister. Thank you for coming here today. I just want to clarify one thing. From what I heard from you today, I understand that you have a short-term solution to the individual cases that your department has come across about the so-called lost Canadians, and that you are dealing with them case-by-case basis. You obviously also acknowledge that those were an outcome of the unfortunate, unwittingly intended consequences of the original citizenship. But you still are you're inviting us to propose how to deal with it in the long term. So you don't right now have a plan in how to overhaul the system or look at it from a fundamental point of view?
Well, we do have things we know we'd like to do. The trick is always, it's not just what you do, it's how you do it. And frankly, I've been in this job for about 6 weeks now. With the experience that you have, I counted it up, and it's around this table, 19 years of experience on these issues. Frankly, like to benefit from that experience. I believe that and always had, that more heads are, several heads are better than one. I never have pretended to have all the answers. I believe that quality comes when a lot of good people with a lot of knowledge work together. So that's why I'm quite eager to have your input.
Okay, so it is accurate that right now there is no long-term, no idea what direction that the overhaul will take place.
The general direction is that we want to fix this for the long term.
Okay.
We don't want to keep using Band-Aid approaches.
Very good. You know that the previous government had set aside $20 million for a review process to the citizenship that your government has cut. May I ask why was it cut?
At that point, there was not a Citizenship Act going forward. If those circumstances change, if there is an act to go forward, then I believe that there could be some funding available.
But the whole idea for that review was exactly to address these issues, and the review was beginning to take place, and your government decided to cut that fund and to stop the review process, and now we're dealing with the situation. So I'm just curious why the decision was made to stop that process and remove the $20 million fund.
Well, we had a couple of choices to make. One was to go ahead with complete review of the Citizenship Act and replace it, or C-14, and we chose to go ahead with C-14 as a priority. Okay. Well, you're bringing up an interesting point, because I want to set a pattern here that we're seeing. We're seeing there's an IRB appointment review process on the go. There is a dual citizenship review process, as we understand. There's a C-14 bill. There's the foreign credentials issue that we still haven't seen any progress on. So it looks like there's a lot of inertia or lack of political will. None of these things have moved forward. They appear to us that none of them have moved forward. So I'm just curious, is this a pattern? What's going on? Why is there a lot of foot dragging? Well, actually, we have made a lot of progress on a lot of fronts. For example, I'd cite the temporary foreign workers program and the announcements that were made in November to enhance that. The facilities in British Columbia and Alberta, and the dedicated sites to help foreign workers and help the employers that need them. We've developed with BC, Ontario, and... But what about these issues that I just raised? The IRB appointment review process, the dual citizenship review process, the C-14, which is supposed to be a priority. You just said it's a priority. And the foreign credentials, which have been announced, the creation of the agency has been announced earlier in 2006, but as far as we know, nothing has happened yet. Well, with the foreign credentials review, we've actually made a lot of progress. We didn't want to just charge in, set something up, and then find out it was the wrong thing. But so we've taken that last year to do extensive consultations with the provinces and territories with a wide range of stakeholders. There are over 440 regulatory bodies involved, and we're going to be making an announcement soon. Can I address that point? Because it's really interesting. When it comes to cutting and stopping programs, you don't do any consultation. You do it right away. You just terminate the program and cut it. When it comes to implementing positive things that you yourself have promised, apparently it's multidimensional and very complicated, and you need to consult a lot of stakeholders. So it appears to be very contradictory here. When it comes to slashing, you do it right away, no consultation. When it comes to implementing programs, we need to consult, we need to talk to stakeholders, and nothing happens. Well, when you're designing something new, it's important to make sure it's much easier to cut something, for example, or to tear down a tent than it is to put it up. No, we know that. And when you're building something, you want to design it right, and because it's going to last a long time. Look at these two acts that we're discussing today and the implications that they're having on Canadians today. Consequences that were hopefully never intended. This is the sort of thing we're trying to avoid. We want to get it right the first time as we build it, so that it is effective and doesn't have to be cut.
Thank you, Minister. That completes the 5 minutes, so we'll go to Mr. Jaffer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And, I have to start out, thank you, Madam Minister, and your officials for being here. I have to agree with Mr. Alghabra. I mean, he's mentioning a number of issues that are in the pipeline and some slow movement. I understand his frustration. There's a big mess that our government had to clean up from the previous government, so I can understand his frustration as well. And I know that Madam Minister, in the short time that you've been there, it's clear that you're working very diligently to get not only caught up on such I think, an important file, but bringing forward some really important processes and doing it carefully, as you say, by consulting with the provinces. I think that's something that our government feels very strongly about, respecting provincial jurisdiction, but also, I think, looking particularly in the area in Alberta, and I say this on the outset, and then I have a specific question on lost Canadians, but as you know, in Alberta, we have a huge challenge right now with labor shortages. We have a huge challenge with trying to process often the temporary workers' permits. I think you're very well placed, being that you had the chance to sit with the HRDC and now in immigration to help move some of those challenges along, because it's really a crisis that we're facing in Alberta when it comes to meeting the labor shortages. We're working, as you know, because of the leadership of our government in expanding the provincial nominee program and also coordinating better with the temporary workers permit. So I encourage all the work you can do, Minister, on that to make that continue to streamline, to improve the times for processing some of those temporary workers permits, because as I deal with industry, particularly in Alberta, I know that that's a huge challenge I continuously hear. But I appreciate your hard work on that file. Specifically, I wanted to address, I remember in 2005, it was one of our colleagues who's no longer here, his name was John Reynolds, who co-sponsored a private members bill that was S2 at the time. And this was the first time that I learned about the issue of lost Canadians, and I remember the debate that took place. And the bill amended, from what I remember, the Citizenship Act to change the resumption of citizenship provisions for people who ceased to be Canadian citizens as minors between January 1st, 1947 and February 14, 1977. Now, I think the one thing that was interesting about this bill was that it actually did receive royal assent. I think all parties were behind the bill and appreciated the fact that that needed to be passed. And so I was wondering at that time, I mean, since this issue did actually become law, from what I understand, was wondering if our officials or you, Minister, could comment on the course of action that the department took to deal specifically with the provisions in this bill, and was it successful, and is that why some of these things are happening that we've heard from your report today, Madam Minister?
Well, the S2 certainly did have some very desirable outcomes intended with it, and it was a good start. We had to do a lot had to be done to inform the public, and we did that. Through people were informed through the website, through the call center. Embassies and consulates were made aware of it, and frankly, we've been able to go ahead with the implementation. And naturally, that's every time you raise awareness of a subject, then it identifies more people that you didn't know existed. So, while it did address part of it, we've actually dealt with 168 applications so far in our Sydney office that are now in various stages of processing. So there's a success story there.
Okay, well, it seemed like there's been some building on that, so I was just wanting to know how that process was streamlined at the time. You mentioned a fair amount in your report on citizenship and your participation, I think, in the citizenship ceremony last week, which I know around this table we've got a fair amount of diversity represented here when we're dealing with immigration issues. As you know, my family came here as refugees in the early 70s, and Mr. Telegdi as well, his family is similar situation, and obviously others. We've seen more and more diversity, not only in this country, but well, I don't think anyone has a monopoly on the citizenship diversity in this country. I think it's something that we can all take pride in. But nonetheless, I think one of the things that I think we have to remember is we all define ourselves obviously differently as Canadians, and I think that's one of the beauty aspects of this country. But I think outside of actual legislation that we often debate and get caught up on here, I'm curious, in your own words, Minister, how you would maybe define the characteristics that define us as Canadians and where you expect to take this particular, I guess, department. And since you're a new minister, I'd like to hear that.
Well, Canadians are known around the world for a lot of good things. That's why people from other countries, when they're backpacking around Europe, for example, put the Canadian flag on their backpack because they want to be seen as being Canadian. And that's a really special thing, that other members of other countries would want to be identified as being part of our country rather than their own, because they obviously see that there's a lot of value in that. There are a lot of ways that Canadians have been described. I think probably the best word would be welcoming. If you take a look back, most of the growth of our country has been based on immigration. Whether those people came here as people in my area where I come from in Haldimand, Norfolk, the early settlers were there in the 1790s. Whether they're people who have just arrived recently, they come from all different countries of the world. And we saw that last week at the ceremony, at the swearing in. Maybe because we've all come from somewhere else, ultimately, we tend to be welcoming of new people. There's a tolerance. There's a cross-cultural learning that's celebrated. And I look at my wonderful area of Haldimand, Norfolk, where we had a large influx of immigration in the 50s, mainly from Eastern Europe. But these people have made a fabulous success story out of developing the area. We still celebrate our various cultures, and so I see that going forward as something special.
Minister, I will now go to Mr. Gravel. And I would ask members to try and stay within the time limit. Of course, that's my responsibility to bang the gavel down, but the questions have been quite lengthy, and the answers have been quite lengthy as well. So I'm going to hold members strictly to the 5-minute rule from now on to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to address the Minister. Mr. Gravel, please.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Minister, for being here. I had a number of questions when I read the document that we had been provided, and that's why I would have liked to have also had your speech. I'm a new person to this committee. I have also simultaneous interpretation, so this is another obstacle for me. And I had a number of questions reading your before your presentation, and you had responded to them during your presentation, particularly with regard to Mr. Taylor. I have a question with regard to the ancestors of Mennonites in the Mennonite community, including those for whom marriages were not recognized because they were religious ceremonies. Are there many of these individuals? That is, people living in Canada who don't know that they're not citizens. And how are you dealing with these cases? Because there is Mr. Tatrum, who lived in Canada from the age of 6 months on, and given regulations and legislation, he lost his job, and he also lost his house. And he waited 3 years before being recognized as a Canadian citizen. So I don't know if there are a number of other individuals who are in the same boat as he is, but how are you managing these cases? What is meant by illegitimate marriage now or back then, but how are we going to resolve these cases?
Well, you bring up a very good point, and first of all, congratulations on joining the committee. That's exciting. There are significant issues here. One of the things that we're trying to identify, and we are working in this regard, is the numbers involved. We're not sure, because every case has to be looked at individually to determine eligibility. If there is a significant, what we call attachment to Canada, demonstration that people have lived here a large portion of their lives, have contributed to the workforce, have a reason to be part of Canada, to consider themselves tied to Canada, then we would consider the use of Section 5.4, which is how we granted citizenship to the 33 original ones.
Okay. With regard to Mr. Taylor, was his case resolved? Even if you have appealed, that
case is currently still before the courts. As I mentioned in my notes, we believe that there was an error in law in the last decision, so we're appealing that.
Thank you, Mr. Gravel. There's a couple of minutes left here, so if you want to go to Madam Fay with the remaining time.
Toujours dans la même veine des questions.
Same types of questions with regard to the ancestors of Mennonites. What information are you using to establish the fact that an individual is no longer a Canadian citizen? Mr. Teshrub realized that he was no longer a Canadian at what moment, and what information, what file did you have to determine that this individual was no longer a Canadian citizen?
As I'm sure you can respect, for the sake of privacy, we cannot talk about individual cases, and each case is different. When I first arrived at CIC recently, I was amazed to see the variety of circumstances and how no two cases are identical. They may sound like it on the surface, but once you start examining the documentation, there are different sources for different pieces of information.
But that's not... I mentioned Mr. Teshrub's case, but there are other individuals who are in the same circumstances who would file an application or who intend to file an application. And what criteria are you using to determine that this individual is a citizen or not? What information are you using to determine that this person is a legitimate citizen and the other individual is not?
There's a wide range of documentation that we review, whether it be Canadian or from elsewhere. We have to authenticate those documents as well, because unfortunately, many people try to get in this country using fraudulent documents because we're such a great place to be. So we have to authenticate the documents, but we do look at a wide range of them depending on the circumstances, and they do vary considerably.
So you're confirming that you have no electronic form or set of criteria that would apply to all those individuals who are having a problem with Canadian citizenship?
Okay. Thank you, Madam Fai. Mr. DeVolen, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks for being here today, Madam Minister. This is an interesting issue because of the people that it affects, and the anecdotal stories that we've seen in the media and we've heard a bit about this morning. About a year and a half ago, I had someone come to my constituency office who was having a problem. He was a lost Canadian, born in Ontario, moved to Australia in the 1960s when he was in his 20s. Played hockey in Australia. They wanted him to play on the Olympic team in 1968, so they rushed through citizenship for him. It was his understanding that that didn't affect his Canadian citizenship. Anyway, played in the 68 Olympics, lived in Australia for, I think, 10 years, moved back to Canada, has been here for 30 years, married a Canadian woman, and recently had decided that he should get a passport to make it easier to travel back and forth to the United States. Instead of using his Ontario birth certificate, he thought that he should get a Canadian passport, only to discover that he, in fact, wasn't a Canadian citizen anymore. And when he came to my office, he had been advised by an immigration lawyer that he should get his wife to sponsor him as a Canadian citizen. He pointed out that his wife was actually an immigrant, so she, born in another country, was actually going to be sponsoring him to become a Canadian citizen. His proof of ID was his Ontario birth certificate. The other group that I've been dealing with, I have a lot of retired people in my riding, and I've had a significant number of war brides come forward in the past couple of years, which seems odd that 50 years later, 60 years later, that people are dealing with the citizenship issue. But I think it is the changing in the rules to enter the United States that has precipitated this issue. I mean, this is a long-standing issue, these citizenship problems that are coming to light now as people are coming in to get passports. And I wonder if, I think you said earlier that for people who think that they're Canadian citizens or people that are going through this process, that there won't be any interruption to their benefits, to Canada Pension Plan or Old Age Security. I can appreciate that some older people might be nervous to deal with an important issue like this because they would think, I'm getting my assistance now and I don't want to upset the apple cart. So can you clarify for Canadians whether they're lost Canadians or whether they're long-time permanent residents that want to go through this process to become a Canadian citizen, that by kind of bringing themselves to light that they're not going to lose benefits?
I'll try to make it simple, although it gets very, very complex, and probably is outside the amount of time that we have here. But basically, anyone who is born in Canada is a Canadian citizen. That's the number one rule. There are cases, a few, where we've identified about 450 so far, where there is some dispute as to whether an individual is a Canadian citizen, was a Canadian citizen, or is entitled to be one, for a wide variety of reasons. We are reviewing each of those cases on an individual basis because each one is unique. And while we review those, we have made the commitment that none of those individuals involved in those cases will lose their benefits, such as old age security. They will not be removed from the country because we want to make sure that all of these determinations are made first before anything else happens. So no, while we're reviewing those cases, they will definitely retain their benefits.
Okay, well, thanks. And I think that will cause some people to take comfort from that. Just my last comment, I forgot to mention that the individual... one
left.
Okay.
So
the individual that I mentioned actually is one of your 450 and actually is being dealt with now and seems to be on the way to resolution. Also, another issue, there's been a reference to the Mennonite issue, and I know there are Mennonites that families that moved to Mexico in the past, births were registered there was a church marriage but not a registered marriage. There's also Mennonites who've come from other places, including the United States. Are there any special concerns that you have regarding Mennonites, or are there any provisions in place for them?
Well, we don't deal with specific groups in that way as a rule. I wouldn't say I have specific concerns about any particular group. We always have to be vigilant, though, to make sure that whomever it is that's applying to come to Canada, to stay in Canada, meets all of our safety and security needs. And that includes, we have to prove that they are who they say they are in the circumstances they say they are. As I mentioned earlier, there are far too many people who want to come to this country because it's a land of opportunity in their eyes, and that's a good thing. The bad thing is that they're prepared to go to extreme lengths to do it. And so for the safety and security of everyone who's already here, we do have to validate all of the documentation and all of the submissions and claims that are made in the applications.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. DeVola. Mr. Sixay, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I wanted to come back to the matter of the children born to Canadian Armed Forces personnel in the Cold War period. One of the people who's been working on this issue is a woman named Christine Eden from British Columbia. And just in sort of informal work on this, pretty intense work, but she says she has over 200 files of people who fall into that circumstance, whose citizenship is in question related to having been born out of Canada on a military base while parents were serving for the Canadian Armed Forces. And a number of these people, you had mentioned that you thought a lot of the passport issues were people who were applying for an initial passport, a first-time passport. Well, some of the examples, just some of the anecdotal stories that she sent me, a number of them are people who say that they've held several Canadian passports over the years, and when they went to get them renewed recently, they've been told that their documentation was no longer valid. She points to a number of examples of people in that circumstance. So I'm looking forward to when she appears before the committee. She is coming to talk to us about those circumstances and her experience of this issue. But people who are served in the military, RCMP officers, she points out, have had the same experience of renewal of a passport and being told that they weren't Canadian and needed to resolve that issue before a new passport could be issued. She also raises the issue of people who move between provinces, and there's one example here of someone who moved from Alberta to BC and applied for a BC driver's license, but was told that the record of birth abroad wasn't an acceptable document provincially for proof of birth. And I'm just wondering if you can tell me what kind of coordination happens between provincial agencies that issue identification documents and your department in terms of resolving issues around what's acceptable proof of citizenship and what's not. Would, for instance, your department have negotiations with the driver's license issuing people in British Columbia about what's acceptable ID?
We as a federal government, are the National Registry for citizenship and for applications. Each province obviously has the freedom and the authority to make its own decisions on what it will accept or respect in terms of proof for anything else for its own programs. Driver's license being provincial programs, they get to determine what they want, but we are the National Registry for new Canadians.
So they would be able to reject a document that the department finds acceptable as proof of Canadian citizenship?
I would doubt that, but I could follow up for you.
Okay. Minister, you said that you're currently dealing with 450 cases of this. Has there been any looking back to see how many people in recent years might have fallen into these categories and had to go through a more complicated process to resolve the issues of their citizenship? Has there been any analysis of the previous requests for new citizenship documents or resumption of citizenship that would see how many people fell into these kinds of categories?
Harold, defer to the deputy on that one.
We've tried to do that, Mr. Chairman, but the way that the citizenship system is organized, it's all on a case-by-case basis. So from our perspective, whether the minister is entirely correct and there are 450 cases, or you are perhaps correct and there are hundreds of more, the key is those who are involved must register with CIC. A lot of people are talking about problems of one sort or the other, but we do not have the capacity to deal with the cases unless they register with CIC. So if I could register a plea through the minister and you, if you have any constituents who have concerns, the first thing they should do is register.
So there could in fact be many more cases that have been resolved through the normal channels of the department in the past years. I wanted to ask specifically about the border babies. It seems to me that this is an interesting situation of people who happened to go to the nearest hospital to have their child. Sometimes that was across the border. The border wasn't always taken as seriously as it is today. Are there any special measures in place to assist those people in proving their Canadian citizenship? The only time that they may have spent in the United States was the moment of their birth and however long it took to get released from that hospital. And yet, I guess from what you said earlier, you're saying that they're American citizens, not Canadian citizens, and would have to go through the entire process of, I guess, applying for permanent residence status and then applying for citizenship. Is that the case in those circumstances? Not
necessarily. It's true that if they were born in the United States, that would give them U.S. citizenship. They were expected and required to register the birth or the parents were when they got back to Canada. If they did that, no problem. Then they're also Canadian citizen. If the parents did not register the birth, then the issue comes up. Despite, they may have only been out of the country those 3 days in their entire life. Those are some of the cases that we're reviewing, the types of cases. And in fact, that's where we can exercise Section 5.4 to grant them citizenship in those unusual circumstances.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Sixay, Mr. Shipley, and then Mr. Karagianis.
Mr. Chairman and Madam Minister, it's good to have you here, and I appreciate very much some of the comments that you've been making. And I want to just go to sort of our Canadian labour market. Just a couple of questions and I know you touched on this in your opening remarks, and I think it's critical and it's very supportive that you did this, and it has to do with foreign credential recognition. In my former life as mayor of our municipality in southwestern Ontario, we seem to be struggling in a number of areas with this foreign credential recognition process, whether it was the profession of medical doctors, the profession of having those trades, skilled trades people that were coming in. And getting those individuals, we'd always hear the story that they were coming in and they drove taxi cabs for 5 years, and then you had those professional doctors that were doing this. Those always seemed to be the ones that floated to the top. And then we were struggling in our communities to be able to fill the vacancies, whether it was doctors or whether it was professional skilled laborers to fill those vacancies. I'm wondering, and you touched on it a little earlier, about creating an office and able to deal with the professionals that would be coming into Canada so that they actually, when they got here, that they might be able to practice their profession. I'm just wondering a couple of questions. Setting this office up, just for clarification, I'd like you to expand on a little bit, if you would, of how that would actually speed up the recognition of those individuals, and what we're doing about it to make this happen. And I'm wondering, We're doing something now. Is this a new problem, or has it been existing? I would have said this is something that's been out in our front for many years, and yet there doesn't seem to have been anything done about it. But I'm assuming that from your comments that you're very much on track.
Point of order. Mr. Talagdi.
We decided that we're going to hold special hearings on the whole issue of citizenship, particularly because it has been such a problem. That's what our agenda is, and it relates to citizenship. So I really wish that we would spend the time that we have with the minister talking about citizenship, because these meetings and all 4 meetings were specifically called to deal with the citizenship issue. So I would suggest if the member doesn't have a question on citizenship, then we go on to a member that does, because people are tuning into this program on telecast, webcast, to watch it specifically for citizenship.
To the point of order, Mr. Shipley.
This is to the Minister. Citizenship and immigration has very much to do with getting people into our country in terms of the immigration and citizenship. So I look forward for the Minister's response.
Well, I'm informed by the clerk that there is no standing order which specifically covers that. I know what the member is bringing up, that we should be honing in on the citizenship problem. But I've been flexible with members on my left and members on my right, and the minister is here to provide information. So I will allow the question to stand and for the minister to respond.
I would like to. Well, a meeting that we're currently holding is a special meeting on this particular subject. We will be meeting on Tuesday and Thursday with other witnesses on other subjects. This is a priority. Our colleague opposite is new to the committee this morning, and really we wanted to address this particular issue that relates to the loss of citizenship. This is what we want to do. Normally, I wouldn't intervene with regard to a point of order of this kind, but this morning we are really talking about the loss of citizenship. So I really would ask my colleague to limit himself to questions related to this issue on citizenship.
Well, since there is no standing order which specifically addresses that particular point, I guess we are in the hands of the committee. If the committee wishes to, confine itself to just the issue at hand today, then I'm in its hands on that. To the point of order, Mr. DeVoe.
To this point, I appreciate the sentiment, but I mean, if there's no restriction, if there's no standing order that restricts what members can ask a minister about, like whether this is a regular meeting or a special meeting, meaning it's being held at a different time, I'm quite frankly shocked that the opposition members want to give control to the chair to determine whether people are on topic or not. I mean, I've been to lots of committee meetings, and the questioning often varies off what is laid out in the agenda. I think it's appropriate. I appreciate the sentiment of my colleague from the bloc asking that we do that, but that's different than restricting members in terms of what they can ask. So I think that the minister should be given an opportunity to answer the question that was put to her.
To the point of order, Mr. Karagianis.
Mr. Chair, I think every member has 5 minutes. They can use that time as they wish with the minister. And I think we're wasting time here.
Yes, we are. I was about to point out that we are wasting quite a great deal of time here that could be put into questioning the minister. We don't very often have the minister here. So Mr. Shipley has approximately a minute or so. So do you have a last follow-up question, Mr. Shipley, or do you want the minister to answer? Okay, I'll allow the minister to answer that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The honourable member is absolutely right. We have a lot of people coming to this country who have a lot of talent, a lot of skills and talents that we need in this country, because, quite frankly, our labour market needs are such right now that we're not getting enough of those skills and homegrown. And so we're going to have to increasingly, going forward, rely on immigrants to meet those needs. And we have taken a number of steps going forward. I hope to have some announcements to make soon on some exciting steps that we've taken in this regard to make sure that those who have credentials get to exercise them here.
1 minute left. Mr. Shipley.
I'll hand off to
Okay. Mr. Komarnicki for a minute.
I'll just have a brief question. I noticed that there's been some mentioned issues relating to the Mennonite community, and of course the fact that there was some issue relating to the recognition of their marriages other than civil marriages. You've taken some proactive steps to deal with individual cases, and I appreciate it's a constructive approach for the short term. How have your steps been taken by the community at large? Have they been receptive to your actions? How have they viewed what you have done so far?
Seconds, Minister.
Now, to keep it very short, the Mennonite Central Committee has welcomed our efforts, and they are very, very pleased with the progress that we made and where we're taking this.
Thank you. Mr. Karygiannis.
Madam Minister, I want to thank you for taking some of the implementations that came from the opposition, and you certainly looked and worked upon them. However, I'm just wondering if I can ask you a question. Stats Canada, do you find that it's a credible organization, and would you say that they provide Canadians with the right information and accurate information?
Well, Stats Canada collects a wide range of information, and I couldn't possibly comment on the accuracy of all of it.
Do you find their information credible, yes or no?
I haven't had occasion to use it except in an official capacity in quite some time, I'm afraid. So I wouldn't be in a position to evaluate how reliable it is.
Would you say, Minister, and I'm looking for a simple answer to a simple question, is Stats Canada something that is a government organization or arm's length, has valuable information to our day-to-day lives, and we spend millions of dollars in order to collect that information? Would you say it's a credible organization?
I would say yes.
Okay. So when Stats Canada reports through CBC there's about 50,000 people in this category, are they wrong?
I don't know how they derived that number. I couldn't say how they derived it. I know we've tried to, and we haven't found the means, so I'm curious as to how they managed to.
Madam Minister, 2 days after the letter came in from your predecessor, it was very vague. I called your department because I thought it would probably affect one of my daughters who was born abroad. And I was asking specific questions. I even called the Deputy Minister's office, and at that point in time, they couldn't give me answers. It took them 2 days to come up with the suggestion that it was children of children. So if it took them 2 days to come up with a suggestion it was children of children, I say to you that Stats Canada has more reliable figures than you're giving us today of the 450 or 600 people.
I'm sorry, was there a question there?
I'm saying to you that you don't know what you're talking about. Now, your deputy said that in websites across the country or across the globe, there's information about Canadians and the citizenship if they lost it. Is that right, Deputy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sir. So one of the largest offices, the consular offices around the world, will be Hong Kong. So on the Hong Kong website, you would have information right up front and center.
I have no idea, Mr. Chairman, whether it's front and center. I was told that every Canadian mission, and in particular any mission that has an immigration office,
Then,
that we
Deputy and Minister, I'd like to pass to you what Hong Kong website has on there. It doesn't have much information. It's not up front and center. Just took it off, right off the website. Andrew, why don't you pass it down? So if Hong Kong, I represent 16,000 Chinese, and a lot of them have dual nationality and they go back and forth to Hong Kong. If Hong Kong does not have it on there, then which office does have it? And you've had close to about a month since you made the announcements.
Well, it is on the CIC, our main website, part of the Government of Canada.
It's on the CIC website. Now, wouldn't you think that Hong Kong should also have it?
I would hope it would.
I mean, the Deputy Minister said it's all the websites across the world.
We were advised that that had happened.
You also said that you advertised. You extensively advertised media. And I'd like to ask how much and where did you advertise?
I have to get that information to you, and we'd be happy to do so.
Are you trying to tell me that you don't know which major newspapers off the top of your head you advertised with? Was it the Star? Was it the Globe and Mail? Was it the National Post? Was it CBC? Was it CTV? I look at those papers religiously every day. I didn't see an advertisement.
I'd be happy to provide that information to you.
Well, Minister, wouldn't you know which newspaper you advertised with?
If I could provide that to you right now, I would. I'm sorry, I don't have that information to hand.
Did you advertise with any? Well, your minister is here, and I'm sure your staff is here. Wouldn't one of your staffers or your deputy minister be able to answer that question?
The information in the very short term that I was referring to was retained by the Passport Office. I remember seeing some in the Globe and Mail and the Citizen. The other advertising that I was talking about related to the change in the rules in 2004-2005. I was told by the department that we had advertised, but I really don't know which newspapers we advertised in there, and we'd be happy to provide.
So you might have advertised and you might not have advertised.
No, I said we advertised. I just don't know where.
You don't know
a couple
where.
of years ago. I wasn't there.
Can you also tell me what steps you're taking to advise Canadians that are living abroad and having children, and when they go to register their children, can you also give me some advice as to what the department has been doing over the years? So if it says to them, look, if you're second generation, you could lose your citizenship?
Well, now when they receive the card, it does, thanks to this committee, there is an advisory on it that they need to, an indication that it does have a limited life. But as the deputy said, when people contact the embassy, we don't always know who's anywhere near one of our mission offices. But if they have reason to be in touch with our mission office, there is information available there to advise them. And if the topic of citizenship comes up, then we do try to make sure that they are aware of the circumstances. But we have no way of knowing who is in a given country at any time unless they register. Yes.
Some of your officials abroad are bringing hindrance to people applying for citizenship?
Very brief
Kenya,
response.
for example?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question.
Okay.
Some of your missions abroad are bringing hindrance to Canadians applying for citizenship. Kenya, for example, to Canadians that have been living in Canada for many years and they went back to Somalia or Somaliland. I'm dealing on a case right now, and your office is certainly bringing blocks to this case.
I'm not familiar with. I need to know more information.
Okay, that's 6 minutes, actually. So we will go to Mr. Komarniki.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. My question will be directed to Mr. Fadden. And I noticed we've had remarks about the numbers of people that might be affected in the various categories and so on. But to put it in some proper perspective or context, I know that the minister has added additional staff to the case processing center, implemented a dedicated referral line at the call center for clients who wish to speak to an agent about their citizenship status. And I'm sure people are encouraged to call if they have any questions regarding their citizenship, and the department, I'm sure, would be more than happy to dedicate their time and resources to answer those questions. And I do know that there's a greater degree of coordination between the various departments, whether that be Passport Canada, Service Canada, Canada Border Services. But can you give us some context to what has been incoming over the last number of weeks, given those resources and the call lines?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. We opened a dedicated call line on January 26th, and between then and the end of the day on the 14th of February, we had 10,200 odd calls to that line on a variety of issues, and of those, 713 related to the loss of citizenship. And of that number, 670 we were able to confirm citizenship, and 43 were referred to Sydney for further review. So I think we understand that 450 is not a magic number. It's what we have in the system now. But when we find that we've had 10,000 calls and only 43 merited further review, we have some difficulty coping with the idea that there are tens and tens of thousands. So I go back to the earlier point I made, which is if anybody knows of a difficult case, they should register with the department. What we're dealing with now are those that have been registered, and every case that is a significant anomaly has been assigned to a particular program officers, and I know that in many cases there have been many telephone exchanges with them, and we're dealing with the cases, as the Minister said, on an ongoing basis.
And thank you for that response. I certainly appreciate the additional efforts and dedication to this issue, and I hope that you continue in that regard. I myself happen to be in a riding that borders the United States, and certainly there are many along my constituency border that might be deemed to be border babies, in that many communities are almost right on the border or very close to the border, and many of them may have been born in the United States, but for all intents and purposes reside in my constituency, do their business in my constituency. In fact, have every attributes of citizenship that one might imagine, and are certainly not only well connected to my constituency, but I would consider in every way Canadian citizens, so they have a substantial connection with Canada. Tell us, what is exactly the legislation as it relates to what we call border babies, and how that has been dealt with and how that will be dealt with down the road should anyone identify themselves as being in that peculiar circumstance?
Mr. Chairman, between 47 and 77, a Canadian born outside of Canada, a person born outside of Canada to a Canadian parent had to register that birth within 2 years. Between 47 and 77, post 77, they were eligible to be registered as well, and it was extended. The approach that we've taken in dealing with these cases is that if there has been a substantive and substantial connection with Canada, in those circumstances where they have not registered, we are recommending to the Minister that she use her authority under 5.4. So if there's a case where somebody simply went abroad, as the Minister said, for 3 days to be born, they spent their entire time. I was born in Quebec, 10 miles from the Vermont border, same sort of situation. A lot of my friends were born in Burlington, Vermont. If they spent their entire life in Canada, we can provide documentation to that. We'll recommend to the Minister that she exercise her authority under 5.4, where there's no requirement for permanent residence, there's no requirement to do anything. We simply have to prove the facts to the satisfaction of the Minister, and she's able to provide citizenship.
So anyone finding himself in that situation obviously ought to get in contact with your department on the short-term basis for resolution. And also I see Mr. Chapman here as well. And he was one of the individuals that was quite instrumental, along with Mr. Reynolds, in the promulgation of S2 that came through the Senate and actually addressed what can appropriately be called lost Canadians. And I know the term has been used interchangeably and perhaps incorrectly to fit situations, but that particular bill allows citizens who were minors between January 147 and February 14, 1977 that have lost their citizenship in some fashion or another through their parents to actually apply, I understand, online to get that situation corrected. Can you tell us a little bit about the process and what's involved there? And I appreciate that Mr. Chapman would think there needs to be some additional work done, and perhaps that's the case. But for the moment, what does exist?
The Minister answered this question briefly earlier. We've had information on our website. We've produced information kits. People are prepared to answer the question through our call center. And since the statute has been proclaimed, we've had 168 applications, and they're all in the process of being dealt with through the processing center in Sydney.
Mr. Gravel.
Yes, I want to come back to the border babies because I was listening to my colleague opposite to talk about this, and I don't know if everywhere in Canada it happens in the same way, but I'm from Quebec. I'm a minister, and I have registered a number of babies myself during that career because it was the priests who did it through baptisms. So I'd like to know, how can you blame people today for not having registered a child if they were in the States, for example, when it's the churches, in fact, that registered these children, if the children had their babies, if the parents had their babies baptized, because it was up to us up until 94 and not up to the parents. So mistakes maybe were made by the churches and also perhaps by others.
And I do not want it to be construed that I'm blaming the churches, not at all. There are a number of reasons why births weren't registered, some of them administrative, some of them the parents failed to do so themselves. And what we're trying to do here is apply the law as it exists, and that's why we are using special circumstances like Section 5.4 to remedy those situations.
But in fact, it should be easier for those individuals because they were born before 94. Well, it's easier to verify, in fact, if they are Canadian by birth. Well, perhaps they were born in the United States, but perhaps there are cases where mistakes were made by the churches, without blaming the churches, of course. It would be easy enough to resolve these issues, I think.
Pour être relativement bref,
To be quite brief, the legislation is clear. If there was no registration, the individual is not a Canadian citizen, be it a mistake made by the Crown, by a church. It doesn't matter. The law requires a registration to have been done within 2 years of the child's birth. So our solution is to use the minister's authority to grant citizenship under Section 5.4. This process is quite quick, and all we need is documents to prove the person has resided in Canada.
Mr. Gravel, thank you. Mr. Jeffer, I'm just saying that that was only 2 3/4 minutes, but if you want to go to Mr. DeVolden now. Okay, instead of Mr. Jeffer.
The problem we have, Mr. Chair, is that the minister's done such a great job answering the questions that we're actually, I think we've exhausted a lot of the points on this issue. But I want to make a quick comment before I turn my time over to Mr. Komarnicki. But I think the notion that in the short time you're going to deal with people that bring themselves forward on a case-by-case basis and use the tools that you have as minister and the discretion to try to resolve those issues is a good idea. I can't imagine how somebody could disagree with that. You've also expressed a willingness to, at the same time, to look at long-term legislative solutions, and you have identified that there are many people on this committee. I'm relatively new to this committee, but you're right. There are many people on this committee with a lot of experience, and I appreciate your willingness to work with the committee, and I'm sure many of the committee members feel the same way in terms of proposing something that kind of tidies this up. As I read some of the quotes from the 1947 and the 1977 Act, it reminds me of that old TV show, This Is the Law, where they showed you the little skit and you had to guess which arcane law was being broken. So I think that trying to create a level playing field and trying to figure out a way that people are being treated fairly and consistently is long overdue, and I applaud you if that's a tackle that you're willing to take, a problem that you're willing to tackle. Anyway, Mr. Komarnicki.
Yes, Mr. Chair, and again, I'll maybe direct my comments to Mr. Van. We've obviously heard about various categories and cases that come up, and some of them are referred to incorrectly or interchangeably. Can you sort of set out for us the difference between resumption of citizenship and confirmation of citizenship? How many categories are there, and what's the big picture? What are we dealing with in this area?
I can try, Mr. Chairman. To go back to one of the points the Minister made initially, you have to start from the premise that most of the people who seem to be affected by these difficulties are likely Canadians, and they have lost their proof of that citizenship. And I understand that for many of these people this is frustrating, but in many ways it's no different than the situation that I am in. If I apply for a passport, I have to find a way of proving I was born in Canada. I mean, as it turns out, I was born in Quebec, and one of Mr. Gravel's colleagues gave me a baptismal certificate, which is no longer valid, so I got a certificate of birth from the authorities in Quebec. So it is an administrative process to prove that you're already a Canadian. The second broad category are those who either were or could have been Canadians. And if we talk about border babies, if they were registered within the 2 years provided by the statute, they were Canadians from the moment they were born. If they were not registered, either within the 2 years or the somewhat longer period provided by the statute, we have to find a way to make them Canadians. And that was in part my answer to Mr. Gravel. There's no other provision in the law, short of the regular process. They are in Canada, they're permanent residents, and they apply. The minister's indicated that in those cases she's prepared to use her extraordinary powers under 5.4 to short-circuit the process and make it happen much faster. For other circumstances, such as the Mennonite marriages, people who lost their citizenship because their parents abjured their Canadian citizenship and they therefore lost theirs, I come back again to what the minister said. It's very difficult to sort of develop a neat little chart saying that there are 6 categories, no more, no less. But what we're trying to do is, if there's a substantive connection with Canada, we'll make recommendations to the minister that she use her authority under 5.4. The difficulty, of course, arises with those cases where we're going to have to decide if over the course of the last 30 years the person has been in Canada 3 months, is that a substantial connection or not? And it's a conversation we've started having with the minister. But most of the cases we've had so far, people have been in Canada for a long time, and in those cases we're able to make the recommendation to the minister.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Komarnicki. Mr. Sixay.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, a couple of questions. First one is, a few weeks back, we had several of the new appointees to the Citizenship Court judges appear, and the senior Citizenship Court judge at that time told us about a screening process that had been in place to screen potential new Citizenship Court judges. But he also told us that none of the people that we were examining that day had gone through that process, none of the appointees of the current government. Can you explain to us why that process isn't being engaged?
Well, there are two issues here. Number one is, a couple of years ago, a process was put in place for selectionship of citizenship judges. It was supposed to be temporary, and it's still there. So it's time to do a review of that process. One of the challenges with it is, from various reports, is it seems to be cumbersome and concentrates the decision-making power to an unacceptable degree. So I have instructed that a review be done of that process to make sure that it's open and transparent. But that could take some time, and we do have a shortage of judges at the moment. There are more openings coming up, and there is also a backlog of people needing citizenship swearing-in ceremonies and such, and the services of the judges. Those people deserve to have service, so we are moving forward, making appointments as openly, as transparently as possible, based on the criteria that the appointees must be merit-based. And while we go forward, the ones that came forward have already gone through some processes. Going forward, we are going to make sure that it is competence-based and to make sure we deliver the services Canadians need and deserve.
Minister, when that sort of process was already in place, when it seemed fairly transparent, when it was run by the senior Citizenship Court judge, can you tell us what process has replaced that in this interim period? Is there any kind of review or screening process in place?
Well, we have been doing recruiting from a broader talent pool, for starters. We've advertised extensively across the country in areas that hadn't been advertised before. So that's number one, is to broaden the talent pool. Then in terms of evaluating them, there is a process. We're using part of that and then going forward.
It sounds a little skimpy, unfortunately, Minister. I had another question about the 33 special grants that you've done so far. Can you characterize those? What sort of the circumstances of those folks were? Is there any? Can you give us any detail of the kinds of cases that led to you granting the special grants of citizenship?
Well, as the Deputy Minister indicated, there was one common thread, that most of these people had demonstrated a truly substantial attachment to Canada. They may have lived here all of their lives, or virtually all of them. They live here currently. It may have been administrative error. There were a wide range of circumstances that got them into the situation. In some cases, it was administrative error. Perhaps coming back from the U.S., the baby's documents were stamped Canadian citizen when, in fact, they weren't. So those are... there was a broad range, but in every case, there was a substantial commitment to Canada.
What's the usual number of special grants per year or per period?
Very few.
So 33 is an extraordinary number?
Yes.
Okay, so it's less than 10, or is it?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sixay. Madam Falco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank my colleagues on the opposite side of the table for giving me the opportunity to ask the Minister a question. I'd like to welcome you to our meeting, Madam Minister. A number of occasions this morning, you said that you intended to review the legislation on citizenship. I'd simply like to advise this committee of something that they don't seem to know. I was on this committee in 1997 as the vice chair, and at that time the Liberal minister had proposed a bill on citizenship. Unfortunately, because of the election, we were unable to adopt this legislation, or rather move it forward to the House of Commons. But I would like to repeat the information that there is a real need to look at citizenship as a whole, not through cliches, but rather through something that is tangible. And I would encourage you, Madam Minister, to do it as quickly as possible, because from what I can hear, based on your comments, is that you do intend to do it. And so I wondered, do you intend to table a bill on citizenship soon? And if so, when?
At the moment, I don't have any plans of tabling a whole new Citizenship Act. We chose, as I explained earlier, we did set our priority on C14. I have indicated, though, that when it comes to a long-term solution for the citizenship anomalies, I'm willing to consider a wide range of solutions. There could be administrative, there could be regulatory, there may be legislative. And if it's legislative, then I'm seeking your input. Actually, I'm seeking your input, whatever the solutions are that you come up with.
That's very kind of you, and I greatly appreciate you telling me this. However, I'd like to remind you that you are the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, that you have the mandate from the Prime Minister, and that it is your responsibility, with all due respect, Madam Minister, it is your responsibility to resolve the problems and not to ask your colleagues to resolve them for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Before I go to Mr. Karygiannis, I should make the committee aware of something, specifically the minister to be made aware. When the notices went out for the meeting, it went out for the minister to appear between 11 and 1 o'clock. Now, when we decided to have our meetings, I'm looking in the minutes here, it's been brought to my attention that the committee, when we decided to have these meetings, we said the meetings would take place between 11 a.m. and 1:30 p.m. I realize this might place the minister in a bit of a dilemma. Is the minister prepared to stay till 1:30, or does she have a schedule she has to go somewhere else?
No, regretfully, I do have other commitments.
Okay, well, I will go then to Mr. Karygiannis as being the last questioner. It is now 3 minutes before 1 o'clock. We'll go for a 5-minute round to Mr. Karygiannis. Now we have a point of order from Mr. Tilley.
Mr. Chairman, I want to have the officials stick around. I understand that the minister doesn't want to answer any more questions, and I can understand why. But the mistake was we were supposed to be sitting till 1:30. So I want to have some of the officials sticking around because we need information information that has to be tabled with this committee.
Okay. Is that a point of order you're making here, Mr. Tilley? If not, I'll go to Mr. Kamarnicki. You had your hand up.
The fact that the notice, in fact, of the meeting was shown to be 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock, and that's the time constraints we ought to respect. The meetings were set extraordinarily beyond that because of the great numbers of witnesses we were going to have, which were actually to appear last Monday but hadn't. So for this particular meeting, the notice was specific to that time, and I think it should be respected. I think Millie Fai had one question she wanted to put forward, and that would certainly be something that might be accommodated. But beyond that, I would, if necessary, have a vote on the matter if necessary. But it specifically, officially said 1 o'clock.
Mr. Tilley, you had your hand up again.
Yes, Mr. Chair. The motion that we passed said till 1:30. So if the minister goes, so be it. If the officials can stay, we'd like to have the officials. If they cannot sit,
well,
if we cannot stay, we have Mr. Chapman, I notice, is in the crowd. We could, and he's one of those lost Canadians. He could come and talk. And the committee could keep going till 1:30.
Okay.
And because we're in a position that we are being webcast, and it was supposed to go till 1:30.
Okay.
So because of a clerical error, we're not going to cut it short.
Mr. DeVolen, you had a submission.
It was certainly my understanding that it was till 1. The agenda says until 1. I'm on house duty. I'm supposed to be back there. I'd like to move a motion I think we've asked all the questions of the minister that we need to ask.
Okay.
I'd like to move a motion that we adjourn at 1 o'clock.
I understand that the minister cannot go beyond 1 o'clock because of scheduling problems, so that's fine. I don't know if officials at this time are prepared to stay for any questions, but I think the minister has a comment.
No, Mr. Chair, if I may, our scheduling was based on the information we received,
Yes.
which said from 11 till 1. So regrettably, we do have other commitments. However, might I offer that if at some future time the officials would be happy to return, perhaps if you have an extra half hour in one of your other special meetings, something like that.
Okay.
Would that
Since I did recognize Mr. Karagianis for 2 minutes, is the committee, it's now 1 o'clock, are you prepared to take those couple of questions?
Madam Minister, when your government was in opposition, you were climbing the bastion, screaming and shouting about waiting times and decreasing waiting times. Has those waiting times decreased since you became a minister, especially for inland spousals?
We actually, we have reduced some of the wait times. We have made improvements in the last 12 months on processing times.
Inland spousals, Minister. Inland
sorry?
spousals. Inland spousal applications. That's my specific questions.
I don't have that specific number with me at hand. I'd be happy to get it for you, but I can tell you we have made significant progress.
Minister, let me read you a fax that I got in 2003. And it states, and this was under the previous government, 2003, says our current processing time for initial decision is approximately 6 months from the date of receipt. Fax, January the 8th, 2007. Our office is currently processing applications of this nature received on the 27th of March, 2006. Minister, that's a year. Your inland spousal processing times have increased versus decreasing. I'll give this to you. Obviously, your official is here, you're here, so you're either misleading us or you don't know your facts.
I did point out that I did not have that particular category, although I do know that we have made progress on other sections. And let's remember, too, that the backlog is so significant that, that it grew by 750,000.
Minister, inland spousals, Canadian citizens wanting to join their families, you're kiboshing them. You're kiboshing them.
I think that's about the end of our hearing today, and I want to thank the minister.
Chair, before you adjourn, we might have the minister go, but we can go till 1:30 because
I think
that's what we said we would go.
The minister has indicated that that's not an option for her officials either.
It doesn't have to stay for us to continue the meeting.
The minister has indicated that's not an option for officials. So I think the minister is in charge there for officials. So.
Mr. Chair, I mentioned that we can have we can have the Lost Canadians, Mr. Chapman here, and we can continue because we said that the meeting is going to be till 1:30, so the committee can keep going with or without the minister.
Are you moving the motion
I
to
am
that
so
effect?
moving.
Okay.
That we keep going till we said we would, which was 1:30.
Okay, well, let's dismiss the minister and her deputy first, and I want to thank the minister and her deputy for being here today. Hopefully, all the questioning that the minister has heard will be helpful to her in making decisions regarding this very important issue. So I'll dismiss the minister right now, and we will entertain Mr. Talegdi's motion. Thank you, Minister.
Mr. Talegdi's motion is
Okay, I'm going to go to Mr. Telegdi to, are we still, are we in camera now?
You are not in camera.
Okay. Okay, I'll go
Mr.
to
Chairman,
Mr. Telegdi to present
my
this
motion is
please.
that we extend the hearings till we said we have the hearings till 1:30, just like we indicated before. The minister numerous times made the mention that Canadians born here are Canadians, and we have somebody with us today, Mr. Chapman, and he happens to be a lost Canadian who was born in Canada, and he represents, I dare say, hundreds of thousands of people like himself. So my motion is that we continue our meeting till 1:30, as we said originally we're going to do. And
any further discussion on that motion?
Call the vote.
Call the vote. We've made that point. Let's just vote.
The agenda is 11 to 1 o'clock.
So, all in favor of the motion, which is to continue until 1:30? All in favor? All opposed? 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Can we have a recorded vote, Mr. Chair?
A recorded vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, it's already been decided, the clerk says.
Mr. Chair, I'd like a recorded vote, and I'm talking to you and not the clerk. I'm asking you for a recorded vote, regardless of.
So you want each party to
You're damn right
record? Okay.
I think one of the things that I'm very surprised right now what's happening in this committee is that generally we've had a really good relationship working on this committee. There's obviously been a mistake here. There's been a mistake in what was sent to our offices and what this time of this committee was supposed to be scheduled. Now, I have a meeting right now at 1 o'clock, and we generally tended to agree, Mr. Telegdi. We always worked on that sort of relationship, and you guys are making this incredibly difficult for us to have this goodwill towards you. We understand you've sidelined us here with a witness, but none of us knew that this was going to happen, and generally we usually do accommodate you, Mr. Telegdi, so I think this is completely unfair, and if you want to poison the relationship on this committee with your actions today, then that's your choice. But I'm actually very frustrated right now when I get a notice like this, and the clerk has said he's made a mistake. No, I'm simply.
No, you're out of order, sir. There was a vote that was
taken. We could have goodwill here.
Order, Mr. Karagianis, you're out of order. Order,
Mr.
please.
Jaffer is out of order. I asked for a recorded vote, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to know the recorded vote.
We will get around to the recorded vote.
Go to the recorded vote.
Are you finished, Mr. Jaffer? Okay. Now, we will go to a recorded vote. All in favor?
I'll read out the names.
Okay.
Mr. Karagianis?
In favor.
Madame Falco?
In favor. J'accepte, oui.
Mr. Telegdi? Mr. Algebra? Madame Faye? Mr. Gravel? Mr. Sixay? Mr. Komarnicki? Mr. Jaffer? Mr. Shipley? Mr. DeVolin?
Okay, so the result motion carries 6 to 5. So we will continue with the meeting until 1:30. Point of order, Mr. DeVolin.
I have a question. I don't know my rules that well, but is it acceptable in a meeting to just name a witness who happens to be in the room who doesn't show up on the agenda and bring them forward to
as long as that's
yes.
the matter of study.
As long as that happens to be the matter of study, we can't call witnesses that way. Okay, we will ask our witness to come to the table, and we have approximately 20 minutes to deal with this witness. And we begin our round.
Just give a statement of how I started this.
Might be in order.
Well, I was born in Canada, and I was born in Canada to 2 Canadian parents, but I am not Canadian. I was stripped of my Canadian citizenship against my will and against my knowledge. Citizenship has become something that's very and extremely important to me, and I have to admit that this has nothing to do with politics. I'll embrace anybody who embraces me on this. I'm fighting for the rights, just like my father did. My father was an officer for Canada in World War II, and he died also not being a member, not being able to be a member of the Canadian Legion, nor was he a Canadian citizen when he died. My mother was born in Vancouver in 1917, and she is not a Canadian citizen. I am seventh generation. I'm very proud of my roots and who and what I am. The problem is we're dealing with a country that will not recognize people like myself. The 1947 Citizenship Act was brought about, and it all started back in 1868. Actually, let's go back to 1867. We had the British North American Act, where Canada actually became kind of a separate country. And in 1868, Canada started the Canada introduced the first Naturalization Act. You were a British subject, but you had a Canadian national. And the actual wording of the actual law was, word for word, married women, minors, lunatics, and idiots will be classified under the same disability for their national status. That law remained on the books for the next 79 years. During World War II, Paul Martin Sr. and several people came up with the idea of having a separate Canadian identity. It was after World War II, when Paul Martin Sr. was walking through the graveyards of Dieppe, when he looked down at the 707 graves and said, "These Canadian soldiers died as British subjects. We are a country without citizens." And he came back and he did a wonderful thing, but he authored the first Canadian Citizenship Act that went into effect on January 1st of 1947. And he finally allowed married women the right to be recognized as citizens, but they did not have equality of rights. The 47 Citizenship Act was a product of its time. So what we had there was a language, word for word, minors, lunatics, and idiots will be classified under the same disability for their citizenship. Now, what has happened is Canada has made a grotesque error in the 1700s and again in 1977. Because in the 1700s, Canada abolished slavery, but they did it with this sort of language. Upper Canada said, if you are already enslaved, you will remain a slave till you die. But for anybody new, slavery is now illegal in Canada. That's what they did in 1977. They came in with a new Citizenship Act. Senator Kinsella was on that committee, and he knows all about it. And they talked about children like me. But it was the bureaucracy that stood opposed to it. So Canada changed the law, but they kind of changed it only for people going forward and left behind children like me. Now, it wasn't alone to Canada. This was a very bad thing that came from the British Empire. Lots of countries had these sort of languages and laws on their books. Trinidad, Australia, Mexico, South Africa, the Philippines, India. A lot of countries have now fixed their laws to incorporate them into today's language. I mean, I'm from Vancouver. In the 1940s, if you were Jewish in Vancouver, you couldn't live in the British properties or join the Vancouver Yacht Club or the Point Grey Golf Course. Asians, Indos, Native Aboriginals could not vote in this country. We go back in 1914 to the Komogata Meru. We go into about 1935, I think, with the ship, the St. Louis. Canada has had major problems with their immigration and citizenship. This is a time for Canada to join the rest of the world and update their Citizenship Act to be charter compliant and to do what every other British colony has done, and that is to go back and accept all their people. Welcome the people, even the adults who took out citizenship, because if there's one consistency of citizenship and immigration, and I hope I pronounced your name, Mr. Kyriagiannis, you said one thing. You said you called CIC 3 times and got 3 different answers.
I called them regarding my daughter that was born abroad.
But you got different answers every time you talked to them. Well, I've been dealing with them all my life. I'm 52 years old. I came back to Canada trying to get back into this country in 1972 when I was 18 years old and was turned away at the border saying, you are not welcome here. And that's the way it stood for me all my life. So the consistency is CIC doesn't know what they're talking about. And lots of people have been given the wrong answers. And today, the Government of Canada is making the individual responsible when, in fact, it was the Government of Canada that has made the mistakes. There is a very simple solution. It's one paragraph in Trinidad. They could come in with Section 3(1)(f) to the current Act and basically end this almost overnight. But what took place, and I went into Mr. Ed Komarnicki's office a while back and said we can make the Taylor case go away with a Section 5.4, but this government persisted to put him into court. And now they got something they never bargained for. They lost bigger than they ever imagined. And they're going to lose even harder if they continue pressing forward, because in British law, the 1947 Canadian Citizenship Act was not legal. So what we have to do is go forward. We pick up the chips, and we should rewrite the Citizenship Act to make it charter compliant for everybody. We start with Section 3(1)(f), we make the Taylor case go away, and we get promises, or we have to. We can't even get promises. Promises don't work with politicians. We have to redo a Citizenship Act that everybody can agree with, that is charter compliant. And there's your problem. We have 3 separate classes of Canadian citizen in this country right now. So there, I'll take any questions, but that's the gist of what where I'm coming from.
We've got approximately 14 minutes, so I think Mr. Telegdi is our first questioner. Mr. Telegdi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chapman. The minister said that people born in Canada are Canadian citizens. Obviously, you and tens of thousands of people like you, 100,000s of people like you don't fall in that category. One of the things that has bothered me in terms of this government is we had previous attempts at Citizenship Act, C-63, C-16, C-18, that we attempted to put through, and in the last Parliament, at the invitation of the minister, 2 ministers, we produced 3 reports in this committee, and that would give guidance to the government on how to fix the Citizenship Act. We had a budget attached to that for the Citizenship Act. Had we not had the election when we had it, I dare say Canada would have a new Citizenship Act right now, because those recommendations, which were supported unanimously, I might say, by the Conservative members of the committee and in the House, when the occasion arose, gave guidance to the government on how to fix up the Citizenship Act. Now, when the government changed and we had the new government of Stephen Harper, Prime Minister, in less than a year, we got 2 ministers of citizenship and immigration. You know, citizenship and immigration is a difficult department. If you want to do nothing in a department, what you do is you put in a brand new minister. And what's interesting is, and I quoted Mr. John Reynolds before, who made the comment, CIC, that's one department that needs a massive cleanup, and we got to straighten that mess out. The problem is that the department is spending all sorts of money fighting court cases. They had the Brenner case in 1997. The Brenner case was very clear. It went to the Supreme Court. It gave direction, and they cannot discriminate on the basis of the gender of your parents, or should I say that it was the mother or the father that has citizenship. The department ignored it. They have the Taylor case where they're fighting against a son of a veteran who fought for this country in the Second World War to deny him his birthright. They ignored the ruling of Justice Luke Martineau, and they have said, we're going to go to the Federal Court of Appeal. We lose that case, we're going to go to the Supreme Court. So essentially, they're using money, after they eliminated the court program, taxpayers' money, to fight the sons of veterans from reclaiming their legitimate birthright. Does this come down to the fact that when this government did not appoint Diana Blonsey, who's the most knowledgeable person in the Conservative Party,
I don't think so.
as the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration, that they were really sending a signal that we're not interested in this issue, and let the bureaucrats keep running the department?
Well, I would have liked to have seen Diane. Diane certainly knew this portfolio. Regarding the courts are the wrong place to fix this. It just becomes a barnacled creature, because the minute you have one decision, it affects another, and you have results you don't expect. The Benner decision, which is odd, because the Benner decision went to the Supreme Court of Canada, and in essence they ruled that the 47 Citizenship Act was blatantly discriminatory, thus granting citizenship, the effect of it, granting citizenship to foreign-born children of a Canadian parent. Therefore, had I been born outside of Canada, today I would be Canadian, and so would my children. But I was born in Canada, so I got passed over. The Benner decision, when I brought that little anomaly to the attention of the Senate, every senator in the room's head was going up and down saying, this doesn't make any sense. 7 days later, the then acting Director General of Citizenship and Immigration, Patricia Burkett, came in and said, we are going to throw out the Benner decision. We will not honor it effective August 14th of 2004, and that brought in all of these other lost provisions. So it didn't work, and that's why we have all these different groups. And by the way, I do know the numbers. I know the numbers very well on how many people are lost Canadians in different groups, and why, because one of the Canada's leading statistician in this, who is coming before this committee, is Dr. Barry Edmondson. He's worked with CIC before. He's a PhD. He's currently, well, he's been at the University of Toronto, Simon Fraser, and he's currently at the University of Victoria. And he knows the statistics, and he has shared them with me, so I do know the numbers.
That's, I guess we'll go with 5-minute rounds because of the time constraints. So, Madam.
Now come to me. In this next half hour, we're going back and forth.
Well, no, we started.
We
started a new round of witnesses. So the rule is that you have to go. You have to go down the table and back again. So Madam Fye is next. Madam Fye.
Microphone. In the case of Ms. Jennings, there is something that I don't understand. The minister told us earlier that she was born in Canada, so therefore she is Canadian. However, under the 1947 legislation, because usually the law applies depending on the person's date of birth, so according to the 47 legislation, it would be her father's citizenship that would have been conferred upon her. Is it because there was a rectification in 77 that it made that she got Canadian citizenship?
Well, no, she had it because I was a Canadian child. But we were still chattel of our fathers. And really, looking back, I would suggest it's time to look forward and correct these laws. And we shouldn't go on witch hunts of who is and who is not a Canadian. You know, this is clearly a common sense issue and can be dealt with very quickly. One paragraph from a lot of countries did this trick. So the minister got her citizenship by being born in Canada, but she could have lost it because of her father. And so these are really wacky, screwy laws, and we should go forward with common sense.
But in the case of Mrs. Jennings, she still has Canadian citizenship because her father, he was an American. I think her father was an American.
There is one section, and I talked with one of the bureaucrats back here, and he assured me Ms. Jennings is Canadian. there is one section that I have in, and it's CIC's documents, and it says quite clearly, if you are born in Canada to a non-citizen father and a citizen mother, you are not Canadian. So it is subject to interpretation, but never should anybody like Ms. Jennings' citizenship be in question, or anybody else. I mean, this is a pretty common sense issue. And by the way, when it comes to that, we talked a great deal of remedies such as Section 5.4. Well, they don't work because, see, for children like me, my citizenship was stripped away from me based on the 1948 Act, but the remedy they're giving me is out of the 77 Act. In 47, it says that any child like me can come up to Canada at any time by age 21, and they will give me citizenship. Well, I did that, and they didn't give it to me. Then it says, and with special circumstances, any time in your life you can come back, and the minister must give citizenship. And guess what? They're ignoring that. So this case-by-case, Section 5.4, doesn't work. Citizenship should never be at the hands of politicians. It should be either at judges or it should be very good legislation, and that's our problem, is that we have lousy legislation in 47 and we have lousy legislation in 77.
Donc, si je veux juste résumer, donc dans votre...
To summarize, so in your answer, what you're saying is that Ms. Jennings could have winded up having her case processed by an individual, a bureaucrat who decided to not give her Canadian citizenship.
In that case, yes. We have lots of bureaucratic errors, and next week you're going to hear about some people that have come in that have been on their third passport, and it wasn't until then that they came back and said, you're no longer Canadian, and in fact, it was the government that made the mistake, but forced this person into court and forced this person out of Canada.
Okay, merci.
Any questions, Mr. Sixay?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Chapman, for being here. Your passion about this has always inspired this committee, and I have a feeling we're in the process of that happening yet again. Someday it would be nice not to have to do that. Can you explain to me, you've mentioned a couple of times that a number of countries have solved this problem, and you say that there's one paragraph that would do the trick. Can you tell us what that paragraph is?
I think Mr. Talegdi has it, and I will provide that next week. Trinidad had a solution that was one paragraph. Australia had a little better solution. Trinidad just said, you know, if you ever lost citizenship, you are now a citizen again. Australia added one word. You have to be of good character. Now, what good is, I don't know, but then Australia went a little further and included children. They included war brides, war bride children, and they then gave preferential treatment for the spouse to get into the country. And Australia traditionally has been one of the hardest countries to get into. So I dare say it would be nice for the committee to go travel and take a vacation in Australia. And if they haven't had all these problems post 9/11, I doubt Canada will.
Are you finished, Mr. Sixay?
Two more questions, Chair.
Okay. Point of order.
The witness held something up. And I was wondering, for the record, if he can tell us what it was?
This one's my Canadian Legion card, so I'm a member of the Legion, but my dad couldn't be a member, but I got it based on my dad, because he had taken out U.S. citizenship, he couldn't be a member. This is my Canadian birth certificate, and this is my permanent residence card in Canada, which says I'm a landed immigrant. So it's quite insulting to me, because, see, for me, we talked earlier on Bill S2. Bill S2 did not correct this problem. It gave children like me the right to come back to Canada, but then I have to pay a Canadian head tax, and I can't bring my children. So I have to leave my my children at the border, and so for me to be a good Canadian, I have to be a lousy father and a lousy son.
Head tax?
Well, to me, I have to pay a tax to get my Canadian citizenship restored, and you know what? It's my birthright, and that's one of the questions we have. Is citizenship a right or a privilege? I have to apply
and pay the fee for the application?
I have to pay a fee, and they talked a lot about Bill C-14 with the right of being able to have adoption. So the government of Canada, this government, has made it a priority to allow any Canadian to pretty much adopt any foreign child, and that child will be Canadian within 6 weeks. But I will be Canadian, and I don't have the right to bring my own children. I mean, I can't adopt them. They're already mine. And for the government to process my application, this is a former Canadian, not somebody who's never been Canadian, a guy who's got a real track record here. It says that they could take upwards of 18 months, maybe 2 years to process me. I'm sorry. The punishment here doesn't fit the crime. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm only guilty of being a very proud Canadian.
I'm sorry to interrupt the proceedings, but we are at 1:30. Some members of the committee would like photocopies of these documents, Mr. Chapman. Sorry I couldn't entertain your questions, Mr. Komarnicki, but I do want to thank you, Mr. Chapman, for being here on such short notice, and we will now adjourn our meeting. Meeting adjourned.